Hello, you join me on the south coast of England where I come to see a company that has been at the forefront of wheelset technology for about 10 years. And today Hunt have launched a brand new wheelset, the SUB50 Limitless, and today they've agreed to show us where they design the wheels and some of the tools they use in developing these new wheels, and also the question of why they've developed these new wheels. So let's crack on and take a closer look.
All right. Hi, so this is our Hunts and Privateer engineering suite. So this is where we've got all our test rigs for doing our testing and QC. So in the corner here, we've got our impact test rig. And then next to that, we've got our pressure test rig, fit tires to wheels, and yeah, it's a Perspex box, just so that if and when we do tire derailment, that it stays contained and nothing's going to fly out and hit anyone. This is our QC area. So yes, we've got a very large set of verniers basically here. And this lets us very accurately measure the size of our rims, and then we also use a depth gauge. Every batch has at least one wheelset taken from it, and then allows us to. Ollie is our test and development engineer here, who's going to demonstrate how our 3D scanner works. This sends light at it, and then as it bounces back, it captures the light, and through that can build a 3D model. And the reflective dots just help the scanner to track it. So you put the dots on first, and if you can see on the computer here, it sort of makes a points cloud. The more we can crunch down that development time, obviously the better for customers, because we're getting even more cutting edge, newer things to market faster, be ahead of the curve rather than trying to keep up. And so that's a lot of what has gone into the thought behind here. So between this and our 3D printing abilities, it means that we can go to the wind tunnel much sooner than we used to be able to. There's definitely a chainring in there. It's an SLA printer, so we get a really nice external finish, and so super clean. And then you get some supports, and so we build the rim sections here, you can see, with all of the support in the rim well, and so we keep a really nice clean external surface. We build these up into full wheel sets, and so this is a sample that we took to the wind tunnel. They can hold 70 to 80 kgf of tension, so about 2/3 of what we'd put into a carbon wheel, and then also stay true to form with a tyre inflated to about 30 to 40 psi on them. A little bit rough around the edges, but sanded very smooth, and so they're not meant to look pretty, but as a wind tunnel sample, we found that the prototypes test within about 0.2 of a watt of the carbon equivalents. So it's a really good tool for us, and will always be part of our development process. Taking physical prototypes to the wind tunnel is always the gold standard of testing. That's the most controllable and repeatable environment. And as we've shown you, we have our 3D printing and scanning capabilities in-house, and it lets us play with a lot of profiles and really optimize our shapes in the way that we haven't been able to before. That working with the 48 Lad V1, we didn't have any CFD capabilities in-house, and so that was done with multiple trips to the wind tunnel and just taking prototypes and doing all of that testing physically, and that really put a limit on the amount of just a sheer quantity of different shapes we could try. And so there were certain assumptions and things that we found fast in some models that we would take forward, that actually having had the time and the capability with CFD to test all of I think it was 42 different profiles that we ended up testing in CFD, actually maybe weren't the most optimal setup for a 28 and 30mm tyre. That one of the big changes we made on these is we went to a much squarer hook. So we have a much wider, flatter section on the top of the front wheel. And then the other big thing that we've done is have a front and rear specific profiles. So you can see on the final carbon models just quite how different the profile front to rear is. So the front is the wide one, so the front comes up at 34.2mm external, and the rear is at 30mm external. And that's just because those two profiles are being interacting with the air in quite different ways. That for the front rim, that the most powerful aspect of them is the leading edge here, where it's with the tyre, where it's sort of forcing it through the air, the first contact that the wheel set and your bike and your body is making with that free stream, like clean air. Whereas actually on the rear profile, you're much more dealing with the final conditions. So you don't really want to be, in our testing, we found we didn't want to be much wider than the tyre that you're using, because then you're just separating that air off and you're working that air more, and that final interaction that the rim has with that air. And so we found with those two changes, that at the front we saw some really good aerodynamic gains and like a significant step forward in terms of aerodynamic drag. And then on the rear, it was a less powerful change, but still a small step forward. And then also that narrower, smaller profile lets us be a little bit lighter, and sort of we don't need that weight in the rear, and so where we can save a little bit, save about 20 gram difference between the two rims, and so obviously those little bits do add up, and just lets us like squeeze that last little bit of performance out of the wheel set. And yeah, that was a really exciting thing for us to be able to do, front and rear specific profiles. That as a smaller brand, that's something that we haven't been able to like invest in. That it's more cost, more testing, more validation work, all needs to go into it. And so yeah, like this is like a considerable step forward.
Yeah, so obviously we're here to have a look at learn about the new SUB50 Limitless wheels. The best place to start is kind of with the 48 Limitless wheels and what we did there. Obviously in 2017, 2018, when we were working on that project, we were looking at working with riders like Harry Tanfield, who were really looking at the marginal gains and performance. And they were looking at, and he was running 28mm tyres, obviously tubeless, even back then, and that was his choice. And he was running 55, maximum 60 PSI, racing crits, obviously racing things like Tour of Yorkshire and winning stages. When we designed the 48 Limitless, we looked at the fact that wheels traditionally in terms of profile and design had been restricted by the rim brake caliper. And so obviously working back then, working with Lazer, who'd obviously done lots of wind tunnel testing with when she was at 3T and at Campagnolo, tested quite a lot of the leading manufacturers as well. She knew that a broader spoke bed was really important. A larger radius spoke was really important in terms of how the airflow stays attached to the wheel and improves aerodynamic performance. And the designs that she was developing out were in the kind of 29mm wide, 30mm wide, and that was pretty much as wide as anyone else had gone. People like Zip were in that area at that point. Why we restricted at that width, if we know that in terms of aerodynamics and the width of the tyre, she was discussing the fact that you might actually want your widest point below the tyre on the rim, and that would want to be wider than the tyre, probably significantly, because effectively it's a truncated aerofoil. So with that, we kind of unleashed the boundaries and said we don't have to be 29mm wide. How wide should we go? And that work then developed into a lot of the testing, and eventually we ended up at just over a 34mm wide rim to work with a 28mm tyre, which is often measuring at 29.5mm when inflated on a wheel. And that we were the first, Hunt was the first company to ever do that. And obviously the wind tunnel validation, we released all the data so people could critique that and see the full process in the white paper. And people responded really well, and we really enjoy having good engineering conversations with people on websites or on YouTube, because that allows us to learn more and develop what we're doing. And really, obviously that wheel went on and was, other companies kind of showed that they respected what we'd done, because they could see that when they tested that they were finding a similar performance. Another key area, obviously 28mm tyres were only just starting to be used for general road racing in 2017, 2018, 2019 when we launched. But that has very quickly, over the last 2 or 3 years, become the leading tyre size. So the other thing we know that in-house, that trend, we can already see people using 30mm tyres. And we know that, as we mentioned before, people like Pogacar is running a tyre that measures 32 to climb mountain stages, do the biggest mountain stages in Tour de France. People said it was a completely unreasonable, is what people said when we started the project, and you'll see that kind of, because it did feel a little bit like that when we started that. So, but you kind of see what you can do. Obviously, we really wanted, when we came into, okay, what's the next step for the best all-round road racing wheel, which is where we look at with the Limitless kind of range, especially in that 50mm range. And really the aim was to deliver a wheel set where there were definitely competitors out there who were more than 100 grams lighter than us. Maybe some of them, they were shallow and a little bit narrower, but they were quite lightweight. There were some who were similar weight or a little bit lighter than us, but were considerably deeper. And effectively, we wanted to say, well, how can we really kind of push ourselves, use the engineering capabilities that we've developed in-house since then, in terms of 3D scanning, computational fluid dynamics, in terms of how we can look at the little marginal changes to the profile design and testing in our engineering team and really elevate that. So this is all spares.
So you have spares going back to almost the original wheels?
I think we have spares for all the wheels, and if we're out of something, we're always ordering it, trying to get it back in. So
it's cool. So these are.
What have we got here then?
Well, this is like one of the very first wheels that we did with the Pro Team. I think this 48mm tub that we made. Yeah. So I mean, it's not something that we haven't been selling these for years. We do one cyclocross tub and then one hill climb disc.
That's also cheaper.
Yeah. But yeah, we supplied tubs, a mix of tubs and tubeless, so that's what they requested. But then the very first race, the Perfs race, down in the south, obviously the big season opener down here, Chris, who was on that team, he was their kind of big sprinter, and he actually won that race on the Perfs on a tubeless set of tyres. And when he got back to the car, I was there because we were going around the team car that day, and he was like, "Look, a puncture seal. And he wouldn't, if he was on a tub and he'd had a puncture, obviously he wouldn't have won the race because he would have had to stop, and it was, a few Ks from the end. But he'd seen a puncture, seen it seal, and he won the race that day, and he believed that he wouldn't have had a chance of winning that otherwise. Yeah. And so after that, the team they actually adopted it. We didn't ask them to. Because I think there was a conversation where at one point they'd said, "Oh, we want all tubeless," and we were like, "Well, let's just give it a try with a bit of both, and just so that you've got your traditional stuff." But then they were really quickly converted over to tubeless tyres, and they chose to do that. We didn't push them to do it. Tubeless has the ability to significantly reduce your amount of punctures. We'll go a year without having a puncture in a tyre. I used to ride around here with another big name brand of tyre with tubes in, and I think I was probably fixing a puncture every second ride, because you get little flint pieces that would just dig in and you couldn't find them. There'd be 10 or 12 of them in your tyre gradually working their way into the inner tube. Well, you just don't get that with tubeless tyres. And so we want to make sure that the other things that you have to do to get tubeless tyres and wheels to work well are as easy as possible, because that part is such a massive benefit. So, but we totally understand the fitting. You got to learn a bit. Things like, if you've come from mountain bike, you're going to have learned tubeless over years. Whereas if you've never fitted a tubeless tyre before, it takes time to learn the little tricks and techniques for inflating. But it's becoming significantly easier, has become significantly easier over the last 3 or 4 years to fit tubeless tyres. And now for a lot of people, it's, fit, job done, and don't have to worry about it, don't need special tools and equipment. So it's made a big difference. But when anything changes, change tends to create criticism. So, look back at disc brakes 4 or 5 years ago, it was a massively contentious issue. Realistically now, it's not a contentious issue, and people just ride disc brakes. you know. And there's plenty of examples of it was the same when clipless pedals came out. It was the same when someone invented an aero bar. It was the same when someone invented skin suits. It was the same when someone made, probably, I can't even remember, because those are the ones in my lifetime. I mean, I remember the time when mountain bikers would tell everybody that, you know, dyed-in-the-wool mountain bikers would tell people that V-brakes were far better than disc brakes for mountain biking. But you wouldn't find a single mountain biker on the earth now, probably, or maybe there was probably one, who'll tell you that V-brakes are better than disc brakes. But change tends to happen because people find they're finding a benefit, but those people finding the benefit don't tend to go on forums and get angry about it. They just use it, buy it, and appreciate it, and tell their friends quietly. Of course, if you've been out training on a set of, I don't know, GP 4 seasons with a standard tube in for the last 10 years, and you don't have any problems with it, why change it? Don't do that. That makes complete sense. But if someone is looking to solve some of the issues that Tubeless solves, then I think that's completely reasonable. That's a very good option for a lot of people.
Do you not try to force?
No.
You're right, it's not the right solution for everybody.
Exactly, and you know that's the great thing about tubeless compatible wheels is they'll work completely fine with, you know, work very well with an inner tube, and you can even put it in a tubeless tyre without a problem. And a lot of the tubeless tyres are pretty light now and pretty supple, so you know you can change it as you see fit. So, you know, generally our job is to allow people the choices that will suit. If there are people out there, a decent number of people out there who will benefit from a technology, then we should make it available to them. So yeah, that's the way we view it. But we shouldn't cut it off, and we look at that in our development as well within our product, because obviously one of the things we'll be talking about today is the SUB50 Limitless, and that really is at the end of the spectrum where people are looking for those really marginal gains and the ultimate performance. So that product, we looked at hookless, which ends up being a tubeless only outcome. But when you look at that from a tyre profile, in terms of how that improves things like how the tyre interacts in corners, in terms of roller resistance and aerodynamically, as well as how you deliver the best weight outcome. And when you're that person who's looking at marginal gains, they've often done a lot of research on tyre pressures, and they have started to realise the research on tyre pressures and the way the whole human and bike system is what you're trying to stop vibrating, and so therefore you should be having a lower tyre pressures. Quite a lot of research. Josh Pertner, when he was at Zip, did a lot of research with Team CSC, measuring power outputs on different vibration on different road surfaces, and lower tyre pressures almost always allowed them to reduce their power output to maintain the same speed when they did that research. So having lower pressures is not an issue. So you look at all those things, and for those marginal gains, that hookless and tubeless setup is what delivers those. But if you to look at a lot of rims and wheels in our range, we've got hooks, and I don't think we'll be looking to remove hooks out of and make them just tubeless wheels out of a significant proportion of our range, because for a lot of people it's just a bit easier and a bit simpler, and they don't have to think about doing all that research and selecting this tyre and things like that. There's a great range of tyres that are suitable for that, from the biggest names, and they are being used at the top level, you know. But you know, all the Zip wheels and the Envy wheels are all hookless, and they're all using tubeless tyres in those pro teams. But for a normal rider, they may not want to have to do all that research. So yeah, and learn those things. So it's up to people to choose that. If we didn't put the effort in here, we wouldn't be doing our job of finding the ways that we can serve the rider with a better wheel, and that's our job every day. It's performance wheels. People might look and go, okay, well, you're finding small elements here, and they're reasonably small when you compare them to the state of the art today. You know, we're talking with the new SUB50 Limitless, we're talking over the absolute best wheel we could compare it to, up to and including 50 millimeters. Aerodynamically, we're talking in the region of 1 watt, 1 to 2 watts, and for some of them a bit more. But we're bringing that advancement in aerodynamic performance as well as an advancement in weight and an advancement in tyre profile. So you're adding all of the elements together that we think that customer is looking at those innovations and looking at how they can add up. Once you add all those in and still achieve a good aerodynamic performance, actually making a fairly decent difference in terms of the aerodynamic side, because even Pogacar was running tyres that were measuring 32 millimetres in Tour de France last year. So people, the top pros are really looking at how do tyre and wheel systems perform, not just aerodynamically, and we're trying to deliver that whole balance. So we're taking big steps aerodynamically, but also delivering other areas. All those things, they are smaller elements, but when you add them up, and when you go back 10 or 20 years, there are some very large differences between how things perform now. When you look at, you take the wheels, the tyres, the frame design, the handlebars, the group set, the helmet, the skin suit, the shoes, even your gloves. Once you start looking at all those different elements and you start putting them all together, you would be at a significant disadvantage, to the point you would probably be not very happy about that situation if you're put on a bike and asked to win a race, or asked to perform well, or even asked to go and ride a long Gran Fondo in a group, and you're going to have to do some time on the front in that group. You're going to be feeling that you're putting in more effort than the people who've got those advantages, and that's what it's about. It's all those little elements there that add up.